And then in about 30 seconds to a minute, they'll transition. But you've got to give them some time to do that. If you expect it to be done right then, that's an unrealistic expectation. A lot of people don't shift gears that quickly, and they just need some time for it to settle.
Welcome back to the Running Wine Mom podcast. I'm your host, Samantha Cieslinski, aka the Running Wine Mom. Today, I'm sitting down with someone whose work I think every parent, teacher, and leader needs to hear. Dr. Bethany Bilodeau is a behaviorist, sensory expert, and the author of Ease the Pain in the Classroom. She holds a doctorate in leadership, countless certifications in therapies and approaches you've probably heard of, and some you may not. But what I love about Bethany is how she takes all of the research and training and makes it practical. Her mission is to give parents and educators tools that actually work. So without further ado, let's welcome Bethany. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a fan of the show. I'm so excited to be here tonight. I love the format and style of it. This will be super fun.
Yes, and I am so excited to talk to you because it is the beginning of the school year for my kids and myself. And it is just, I think a lot of parents need to hear what you have to say. So before we get into all of that, to start each episode, we have our wine, and win of the week segment. This is where we share our favorite bottle of wine or vent about something that's been bothering us and celebrate our recent victories. So grab a glass, take a deep breath, and let's get started. So what is your UINE wine of the week?
So my wine, and I probably only drink two different brands, and I love wine, but is Tohu a Sauvignon Blanc, and I love, 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 love this one. So it's one of my very favorites, and I love it year round. It pairs well with everything.
So, well, cheers. I have my red over here, Pinot Noir. And what is your WHINE of the week?
Well, I'm not a big whiner. I'm kind of more of a get things done sort of person. I think probably when kids are not put first, that probably is the big thing that like kind of grates on me as far as things like that.
So what's your win of the week?
So my win of the week. So a week ago, I was hiking with a student who got startled by someone on the trail, and she decided that she was going to break out into a sprint. And I had a 30-pound pack on, and so she sprinted for almost a mile, and I stayed right up with her. This is great. We're getting the steps. I'm so glad we got a little extra cardio today. Woo, woo, woo. And the next morning I was like, please, when I got up in the morning, please let my back still work. And it did.
That is a win. Those bags are no joke. And running with them, oh my goodness. So that'll be a nice segment into your fitness. Besides hiking and running with 30-pound book bag, what's your favorite way to stay active?
I think right now it's probably Peloton. I was a fitness instructor for about 25 years, 28 years. Just the technology just advancing so much after a while. It's like I can't teach on a regular basis. And I coach most of my girls' sports. So I started doing the Peloton thing like 7 years ago, and I love it. It's just their classes are fabulous. I love it.
Totally agree. Who's your favorite instructor?
Robin Arzon.
Yes, love her. Yeah, I do the tread boot camps a lot. I love them.
We want to tread so bad. Like my daughters keep saying, like, if we got to tread, mom, and I'm like, you guys will have to like really commit, like use the
Yeah.
tread regularly. It's a commitment, like the financial commitment of it. So we're on the edge of that because we've been pretty dedicated to the bike for a while. So
Yeah, I love
do you
that.
love the tread?
Well, so I do the app. And I do it at my gym, but my cousin has the tread and she loves it so much. She did the bike forever, and anyone that I've heard that has the tread, they love it.
Having the equipment that they have, it's a game changer for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's what before, like during COVID, I got like a, $75 spin bike from, Walmart or something. And then we ended up getting a Peloton, and I was like, oh, I thought I was working out. Now I'm working out.
The same thing.
Okay. So how does maintaining your fitness routine kind of contribute to your mental health?
I think significantly. I often say, I'm not fit for consumption if I haven't exercised. Like you can tell. My husband always says, man, you can tell the difference when you haven't exercised during the day. It's huge for that. And I think also because our greatest population is students who exhibit physically aggressive behaviors. So for us, it's a matter of training so that we don't get injured. So the majority of us on staff, we get up every day, we do our meditations together, and then we're all in a class or doing something like that, something to help us just maintain our level of fitness so that we don't. And it's really about injury prevention for us.
Yeah. That's so important for especially the line that you're in of work, the injury prevention. I mean, and just working out, not only for your mental health, but God forbid you do get injured, then you're just like
Yeah,
a
keep
whole
me
other
doing any good if I can't go to work. So
right. So let's talk parenthood. Tell us about your family.
So I have 4 fabulous kids. I have 2 older sons. My oldest son is the reason why I'm pretty much in this field. He was asked to leave 3 daycares before he was 18 months old. He was the biter, you know? I'm actually going to do some work in a Montessori school tomorrow. They've got a biter. So they were
Yeah.
like, "Hey, you wanna come and hang out with us?" Yeah, so, and so, parents are real forgiving until you've got the kid that bites, and then they're like, "Yeah, he's gotta go." So, just working with that and trying to figure out how to meet his needs and really feeling as a parent as a failure constantly, like, I cannot figure out how to make this kid feel comfortable in his own skin and really help him be successful. And I think my journey to get him there and get myself there was really what led me into this field and is part of the reason why my field is so unique compared to a lot of other people's. So I have the 2 older sons at the top and then 2 younger daughters that are adopted. I was a foster parent for years, and so I have 2, a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old girls also that are super fun, and, being an older parent, I really enjoy doing things with them and coaching middle school soccer this year. I've never coached middle school soccer before. I've coached little guy soccer for years, and it's a totally different world, but I love spending time with the kids. It's really different for me to spend time with students that are not, challenged, and really I'm not there as from a behavioral standpoint and get to know them as people. It's been super fun.
That's awesome. I'm sure it's a switch you have to turn off too, where
Yeah.
you're like, I can calm down a little bit not to be so. So what were you least prepared for in parenthood?
I think probably the level of guilt. And I think a lot of parents probably, the majority of, especially moms, like we feel that all the time. Doesn't matter how much you do, you always feel like, gosh, I wish I was better at that. I wish I could do more. I wish I didn't fail at that. And it's a lot of times I'm spend so much time with parents saying, you're doing the most. You are doing everything you possibly can. You just don't have the right tools to make yourself feel successful, but you are doing the absolute most. Give yourself grace. And I think for myself too, that's definitely something that I've always struggled with. And I think most moms struggle with, most dads often struggle with that too.
And I think that's a great reminder for all of the parents listening is that we are always trying our best. But like you just said, there's nobody tells us, like, if you have the biter, what do you do? If you have a child who doesn't follow directions, what do you do? So you're kind of just like figuring it out on your own.
Absolutely.
It's wonderful to have people like you who can help in those situations. So what do you think your parenting style is?
Well, it's funny because my sons would tell you she is the strictest parent you will ever be around, but she delivers it in a way that you don't realize she's being strict. They're like,
I love
her
that.
expectations are incredibly high, but she's super fun about everything. So you don't, it's kind of sneaky. Like they're like, you don't really know. And they're like, and I'll say, was I the parent that you were always most concerned about the feedback from? And they were like, absolutely. So, I definitely have really high expectations and that sort of thing, but, and I'm also a parent that I don't typically repeat myself. So once I've said something once, that's it. It's that, I'm not doing the I asked you once, I asked you twice, I asked you 3 times sort of thing. I've asked you once, that's it. And, if you've done it, that's great. If you haven't, then we're moving on whatever result is going to come from that because I just feel like it just frustrates me and it undermines what we're trying to do. And the same thing with them. Like I always feel very, very guilty if I'm involved in something work wise, I'm, on my phone or whatever, and they ask me a question and I haven't paid attention. Like I feel horrible afterwards because they deserve my attention and vice versa. So, my demands are certainly pretty high, but I think that their demands are high too. So it goes hand in hand with each other. And we're run things pretty structured because they're involved in a lot of activities. My 12-year-old signs herself up for every single activity she can find. And my sons were like that too. Whereas my 9-year-old's like, can I just have some time? Can we just back it down a little bit? Like my little one was down here before we started the podcast and she's playing with her Barbies and everything else. And I was like, "You can keep playing Barbies, but you're gonna have to play silently when I get on." And she says, "Alright." She packs everything up, but she's like, "I'll just go up to my room."
I'll just
Okay.
avoid this.
It's a great choice.
Well,
I'm so glad that you problem solved that. Super.
I was just gonna literally just gonna say you gave her the choice to stay or leave, whatever she could handle, and she chose what she could handle, which is something very important for kids to
Yeah,
do.
and in every situation, I try to give my kids as much choice as I possibly can, and I try to give them choices that I'm comfortable with, no matter what choice they choose. And we've had kind of a different relationship where my kids have been able to travel with me and do trainings and go to different schools and see how things are done. So I think they have a very different learning experience, and I think many people are exposed to. So it's been good for them because they really have a different perspective on how it is to grow up the way they are because they've seen so much of the other side of it.
So true. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. So I know you're going to talk about a lot of advice for parents, but what's one personal piece of advice that you would give other parents? Because I always ask all of my guests this question.
Be protective of your sleep and your peace. I think those are big ones. A lot of times parents say, I'll cut some time off here of sleeping, or I'll do this, or I'll do that. And it catches up to you and it's reflects in everything else you do in your health and all of that. And I think that that's a really hard one because I think it's easy for people to say, well, I'll just go to bed a couple hours later and I'll do that later on and so on and so forth. But you've got to be protective of your sleep. And I will say, as a, my husband and I often look at each other at night and say, "Oh my God, are they going to go to bed yet? I know it's only 6 o'clock, but can they go to bed? We're exhausted." And so for us too, we need to, all of us need to be really cautious about that. No one gets enough sleep nowadays. And so making sure that we get more sleep and our kids don't get enough sleep. So getting them to get to bed earlier, wind things down faster in the evening, and that really means, like, shutting down a lot of the whatever other stimulation's going on, whether that's the fluorescence, the dishwasher, the dog barking, whatever it may be, shut that stuff down so that you can start to wind down a little earlier.
For advice. All right, so let's get into you. So how about you tell the audience about what you do?
So I go into school districts and I often set up alternative education programs. And I also go into homes and I work with families directly. And it's usually when people are struggling with a behavior that's really challenging for them. So it could be that the individual's having meltdowns. So at school, it could be that you've got a student who's really physically aggressive. In the home, it could be, oh my gosh, these siblings, they fight all the time. How do we deal with that? So, and I'm oftentimes coaching people on how to extinguish those behaviors. So, oftentimes, physical outbursts and things like that are just signs of they need more proprioceptive feedback or they're not able to verbalize their needs and those sorts of things. So, I'm walking parents through that, or parents will say, gosh, my kid's playing video games, but they're refusing to get off of them to help with the dishes or whatever. And it's like, of course they are, who wants
Duh.
to get off the video games to do dishes? And so oftentimes I'll say, you gotta wait till there's a natural transition, and then you need to come at it with higher energy so that they wanna engage with you and that sort of thing, and use that as a transition point to pull them into it and do it with something else that's really engaging before you ask them to do those tasks, because they're not going to wanna transition because of that. And when you have those kiddos that just refuse and don't want to transition and they like to refuse, and there's certain ages that that occurs more often, there's some areas of the brain that really get stuck and have a hard time transitioning. So I'll say, provide what the direction is of what you want, then back away and give them some time for it to settle into the subconscious. Because if it doesn't have time to settle into the subconscious, they can't shift gears or distract them, one or the other. And then in about 30 seconds to a minute, they'll transition. But you've got to give them some time to do that. If you expect it to be done right then, that's an unrealistic expectation. A lot of people don't shift gears that quickly and they just need some time for it to settle.
Yeah, and I've actually never heard anyone say that, instead of like if their kid is playing video games and you're like, "No, I need this trash out right now." I mean, if someone came up to you and said, someone came downstairs to me and said, "I need you to get off this podcast right now." I would say, "Well, I'm kind of in the middle of something. I don't want to leave. That's not what I want to do." So what do you think is like a good for especially like 9 through 13-year olds? I feel like that's like they're already going through a lot of
Mhm.
hormonal changes and they're starting the rebellion phases and they don't want to do stuff. So what would be a good transition before besides giving them like just telling them and then giving them the time? What if they don't come in up in time? How do parents kind of deal with that?
Yeah, and I'll save things or I'll tell parents, like, save a couple of good things to ask them about or talk to them about during the time of when you want them to transition to something else. So if you know they are watching a TV show or playing a video game or outside playing with their friends or something like that, save that conversation about, "Hey, what are we gonna do this Saturday?" Or, "What friend do you wanna have come over next?" For that transition time. So you can say, "I'm going to come out and get you in 10 more minutes, just so you know. And I have a question for you, and I can't wait to ask you." You've got to add some energy and some enthusiasm to it because if you don't, then they're not going to want to engage with you. They're going to want to keep engaging with that. But when you get them and then you say, "So this Saturday, we don't have anything planned. If you could do anything you wanted," not saying we're going to, but if you could do anything you wanted, what would it be? And you kinda have that make believe game for a little bit, and then you say, "Okay, so here's some options of some things we can do Saturday." As that's happening, you're walking towards the trash or dinner or whatever it is you need to transition.
And by the way,
Body in motion stays in motion. And then when you get there, you're kinda transitioning them into that activity without really even giving them the guidance that you're doing it while you're
yeah,
having those conversations. Does it take some pre-planning? Yes. Does it take mental energy? Yes. Do you get less frustration? Yes.
right.
And that's really
Yeah, it's like pick where your energy is going. Do you want to put the energy into positive or being frustrated, which is
yeah.
super important.
Yep.
Wow, I love that. So you describe yourself as both a behaviorist and a sensory expert. When did you kind of first realize that you had this unique way of seeing people?
I think it was probably I had my company at that time about 15 years ago. I was doing mainly vocational training. I had a lot of certs in the vocational area and I was mainly working with individuals who were having a hard time learning different job tasks and things like that and we were helping them and these were students so they were all under the age of 21 and we were helping and guiding them into that and I said, "But this has so much to do with behavior. This actually has more to do with behavior than it has to do with the job tasks themselves. Because honestly, people don't lose jobs because they can't do the job tasks. They lose jobs because they don't fit into the workplace culture.
Mhm.
So, how can we help enhance that behaviorally and that sort of thing?" And I started doing a lot of my dissertation research on it. And I was one of those people that I did my doctorate for so many years that they were like, "We're going to kick you out. You either write your dissertation or hit the road." So, so I had to sit down and start writing at one point in time, and I did everything on the behavior end of it. So, I really wanted to see how we could mold that and change that, and we even went through a time period where I would approach school districts and I would say, "Give me the toughest case you have. Give me the student that's been kicked out of every placement facility, everything. Let me see if we can turn this situation around." And there really wasn't a single situation that we felt like we really couldn't work with, given the freedom to use the resources and really provide the type of services that we wanted to provide. And typically, what ended up happening is we either integrated those individuals into paid jobs and that sort of thing, or we reintegrated them back into the general education setting, one or the other. And that's primarily what we do at this point. We really don't even do vocational services anymore. We just do behavioral services. When we're
Wow.
not BCBAs, we have a very different approach. It's very sensory related, and we're really looking at the neurology. Oftentimes, I'll observe kids and I'll say, they're not getting enough oxytocin or enough serotonin. I can tell by the way their body moves and this and that. And so I'll talk to the parents and I'll say, okay, here's some potential supplements. Have you thought about 5-HTP or L-theanine or something like that? And then I'll talk to the school and I'll say, okay, here's a way that you can get that from them in the environment. So ask them about their favorite food and then ask them to hand you something. And that will release oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine because you're connecting, you're producing something, and you're appreciating something. And those three things elicit that. That primes the prefrontal cortex to learn. Those are the three neurohormones we need. Just figuring out like how are we going to make it work so that that student can thrive in as many environments as possible. That's we want kids to feel successful because I'm working with students that by the time I get to them, they're like, I hate school. I hate
Right.
it. Nobody likes me here. I don't want to be here. And sometimes they feel that way about home too. Like, my parents are always mad at me or, my siblings don't like me and that sort of thing. And it's more a result of their bodies are out of control and their brains are out of control and they don't know how to harness them and make them do what they want them to do.
Yeah, that makes I'm thinking as you're talking, I'm thinking about a lot of my students. I'm thinking like from as I do high school, but then also I have two preschool age kids. So I'm like, there's an array of people that I am
Huge array,
thinking of right
2
now.
different
Just
gamuts.
like, yeah, it's so true that it's just it's I wish there were more people like you in the school districts
Well,
that
thank
could
you.
help with that. And so you did mention earlier that your son was kind of the one that led you to kind of get into this field. So can you kind of expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, he struggled for quite a while, quite a few years. He had an individual education plan and had a lot of sensory challenges and things like that. We were very lucky. He made a lot of progress, and it was mainly because we stumbled across a sensory school that he went to, which I was like, wow, this is my happy
Wow.
place. I eat here all the time, and then he was able to learn a lot of skills. And almost all the trainings that I attended the first 20 years my business was running was really more to benefit him. So if I would say, "Oh gosh, I think that he needs more activities and dialectical behavioral therapy or something like that," I would go off and attend tons of trainings in that area to try to help support that. And then, it then in turn helped our students and things like that. And we were able to incorporate it in other ways. And we were really lucky in that aspect that we could select what areas we felt were going to be the most useful. And we still do that. We'll look at where our student population is and where we think they're coming from and where our families are and our educators are for the next couple of years. And then we'll say, okay, we need to learn as much as we possibly can about this field or that field or that field. And oftentimes they have nothing to do with traditional education or behavior or anything like that, but they've been hugely helpful as far as us figuring out how to support people better.
And so when you talked about the biting in the beginning, it immediately, I mean, all the Facebook groups I'm in with moms, so many people comment asking, like, I have a biter. And my children were not biters. So when people respond like, "Oh, this is very normal behavior for like a kid who's 2 or
Is
3," and I'm
normal,
like,
but it sucks. I mean, when you get bit,
"Yeah,
what's your reaction? I mean, most of us I even do this to this day, even though I've been trained. If I get bit, I go, "Ah," and I jump
yeah."
like 5 feet, and it's like I make such a big reaction, and it's like you couldn't give somebody else more power than having a reaction like that. So it's which makes it really hard. So I often tell people, wear jean, wear corduroy, on your arms as well as on your body if you're working with someone who bites, and don't respond when they bite. Try not to respond as much as you can. A lot of people will say, well, tell them no, and this and that. That works for an average kid. We
Right.
see very little average kids nowadays. It just doesn't happen. We don't see them. So for your kids who are not average, what they need is they need to, one, not have a reaction when they do it, and they also need to know what the proper behavior is. So whenever they're not biting, they need to hear, wow, you're being so safe. Wow, you're able to verbalize your emotions. You're doing such a great job talking to me about that. You got frustrated. And I knew that you wanted to do something, but you didn't. And then even calling it out and saying, I know that you wanted to bite and you were able to keep yourself from doing it. That's fantastic. Keep your hands back when you're doing that because you better believe they're going to be like,
Like, well, now that you said biting, I'm ready to bite.
I always tell people do it at a transition because if you start it at a transition, they're less likely to bite the person that they're going to or where they're going next and that sort of thing. And it will be once you've been able to master that, then you can back it up into the body of when it would normally happen. So I often tell the story of Noah and the burp. Noah's my middle son. And he used to in middle school, he could burp on command forever, the alphabet, everything else, like most middle school boys can. They're, and girls, they're fantastic with noises. And we were going to soccer practice one day and I had told my older son, I was like, whatever you do, don't respond to your brother. Okay. We're going to get rid of this burping. So Noah's in the back seat. Jonas is beside me. And I look up in the rearview mirror and I said, hey, Noah. He says, what? I said, I noticed that you haven't burped for the last 30 seconds. I'm really impressed with your ability to regulate your body. What does he do?
It burps.
The loudest, longest burp of his life. I'm turning up the radio louder and louder, trying to ignore it. The kid beside me, he's bouncing because he's laughing so hard. And when we get to soccer, he gets out and I'm like, oh, well, I failed at that. So the next day, same thing we're going. I'm like, I'm going to be a little smarter. He gets out of the car. He turns around. I said, hey, Noah. He turns around. I said, hey, I noticed you haven't burped for the last 2 minutes. I really love how you're able to control your body. And he turns and I hit the gas and the both are flapping in the breeze behind. I've got to pull over and shut the car door and everything. And I'm like, yeah, point for mom. Way to go. So next day, same thing. He tries to let out a little one. I ignore it. Next day, same thing. He doesn't burp at all. So then we're in the car. I back it up into the body of the time of when it would normally happen. And I do the whole, hey, Noah, I noticed. And sometimes I make it even sound like he's going to get in trouble, hey, Noah. And instead I, turn it on him and I'm like, I love how you were able to control this, so on and so forth. He lets out a little tiny test one. We ignore it. The next day, same thing. And he says, Mom, I know I can control my body. It's so impressive. I haven't done that burping crap in like 3 months. It's been like 5 days. But so you go after the low hanging fruit because once you get rid of the behavior that's really annoying you, you can love that kid a little bit more. You have a
Yeah.
little bit more joy with your interactions with them, and they know that. So then they're not trying to find what is going to press your buttons because let's be honest, that's what most of our kids do. They're like, I'm just looking for attention. That's why
Yeah.
I'm fighting with my sibling. That's why I'm doing this and that. 50% of the time it's out of attention.
Yeah.
So if we can help them with that, we can get so much further.
And you also, when I was reading up, you were talking to readings. Reading is going to be face reading and micro expressions. Can you kind of talk about what you do with this and a time when this kind of changed your way to respond to
Absolutely.
someone?
Yeah. So we were lucky enough we were able to work with a number of mentors who were really specialists as far as reading body language and that sort of thing. And that for us was a game changer. We were able to then figure out how to stand and how to have our bodies in order to make people feel safe and to make them feel regulated. And that was huge. I mean, I'll walk into a building and people will say, oh, Dr. B, that hall. And I walk down, and within a couple seconds, the kid is no longer, striking the window. They're sitting on the floor, sometimes crying and talking to me, telling me what's going on. I could have two teenagers ready to get into a fight, and I can almost always step into it and they'll immediately back down. And it's not anything I'm doing that's special aside from the fact that I carry my body in a certain way. I have my hands in front of me, my thumbs are lifted, which non-verbally says to the other person that I have a lot of confidence and I can keep them safe. My head is tilted to the left, which says I have a lot of empathy. If I wanted to look smart, I'd tilt it to the right, but I don't need to look
So
smart. I just need
interesting.
to look like I got my feels. So I've got my hips pointed towards them and my feet pointed towards them so that they know that I am really attentive to them. If my toes are slightly turned away or something, it's going to imply that I'm done with the conversation and I'm leaving. And the same thing, I hold my mouth slightly open just so that my frown lines don't say, I don't want to have this conversation. And there's just really simple things that we've been able to learn with that. And with facial reading too, we're able to, and this was huge for our staff, we're able to really look at someone's face and say, they've got those rounded eyebrows. And so they're really concerned with what's going on around them. Their family is the most important. Their students are their most important. Those are huge. Whereas with little kids, you look at them and they have those really straight eyebrows, and those really straight eyebrows say, I just need the information. That's all.
Right.
So we're able to really mold what information we're giving and what we're asking for based on how that person's going to receive that information, which is
Yeah, that's
huge.
great.
It's cut our time from like reintegrating in like 9 months to
Yeah.
3.
Wow, that's amazing. So, obviously, in school, there's a lot of help for kids, but many parents listening are struggling with big behaviors at home. What's
For
one
sure.
simple shift you wish every parent knew that they could really make today?
I think a big one would be just being able to be empathetic. And I know sometimes that's tough because the parents are overwhelmed. And a lot of times professionals will come in and say to parents, well, they need more one on one attention, or each sibling needs to have their own one on one time, so on and so forth. As a parent of 4, and Samantha, I'm sure that you are right there with me. How likely is that? Like, come on, we got to make dinner. I just
Hmm.
vomited.
I was just having this conversation. No.
I would say the biggest thing probably is empathy and having fun and like watching your kids. Do they feel safe? Does their bodies tell you that they feel safe? Are they able
Yeah.
to hold a gaze and eye contact for a few moments? Are they able to smile? Or are they reverting into themselves? Are they on the defensive? Like, what's their body language telling you about how they feel? And sometimes they're carrying it with them from another place. So if they just got home from school or came in, if you've got teens and they're working or they're in sports, like, what is their body language telling you they're feeling at this time, and what do they need to feel? Because when we go into our homes, we want to feel safe, we want to feel regulated, we want to feel comfort, and we want to be able to have fun. So it's, how can you infuse that into what it is you're doing, because that is going to make the biggest difference in the world. You can have a million parenting techniques and everything else, but trust your gut as a parent. I tell every parent that you know your kid better than anyone else. If your gut's telling you that something isn't right, it's not right. And if something, if s even if it's a professional telling you this is what should happen, if your gut is saying that isn't right, it's not gonna work, it's not. You're
Hmm.
So trust
Yeah.
yourself, and that sometimes we question that about ourselves because of things that have happened.
It's hard with the overload of information, too. Like,
Mhm,
I trust this gut, but everyone else is saying that.
mhm,
So it is
absolutely.
important to be reminded of that. So your book, Ease the Pain in the Classroom, what pain points were you seeing over and over in schools that kind of pushed you to write this?
I think the big one was so many educators leaving the field. That was
Hmm.
huge. We were seeing so many educators that are saying, I can't do it anymore. There's too much, there's already too much with staying on top of curriculum and everything else, but then being asked to manage behaviors that are so much more fearful and put us in a state of crisis than we've seen before, and not feeling like we have the skills to deal with that. That's really why we wrote the book, because we knew so many people were in that boat where they were feeling like, I don't know if this is the right career for me. And there's so much that goes into being an educator nowadays. You have to have a million different hats on. And I understand that. I was a teacher at one point in time too. And there's a reason why I don't teach also now. And I just do this.
Right. And so kind of going into my next question, kids today are growing up in such a different world than
Huge.
even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
From your lens, what do you think the biggest behavioral shift you're noticing in this generation is?
I think the big thing, and I hear about this a lot at trainings, is they'll say, they don't respect authority, and when are they going to get a consequence? And a behaviorist at one of my trainings one time said, the consequence is their life. They are absolutely, that is 100% true. They are so fearful of not fitting in and not being connected that that is huge for them as far as them feeling like I'm not going to be successful and my life is not going to be meaningful because I am not seen, I am not heard because what they fear is being invisible.
Right. Yeah, that's very true. And that's with social media, everybody wants to be seen. And, if you're not being seen online and in your home, and I mean, I feel like it's like double whammy with kids today.
It's
So
really tough, and most
yeah,
kids don't have the emotional maturity to be able to handle it.
no.
It's really tough. There needs to be a lot of guidance as far as how to navigate those worlds. They don't have the emotional maturity to be able to get through it.
Yeah. So when a child is acting out, what's one common myth adults believe about the behavior, and what do you think the truth is?
I think a lot of times that, and I hear this a lot is, they're just being oppositional defiant. They're just being oppositional defiant, and probably 90% of the time, I'll say, nope. It's a safety issue, or it's a regulation issue, or it's a hormone creation issue, or something like that. It's not oppositional defiance. And a lot of times they'll say, oh, they need tougher boundaries, or they need you just need to crack down on them, so on and so forth. And not that that's not true. Sometimes that is true. However, in most cases, there's too much sensory stimuli, not enough sleep, dehydration, not enough nutrients, usually lack of connection. There's so many other things that are playing a role that contribute to that oppositional defiant behavior that once you can correct some of those areas, there's so many students I've worked with that I've said, can we just increase their water intake? If we can
Hmm.
quadruple their water intake for about 3 weeks, you probably won't need our services. And that's usually true because
Wow.
dehydration presents very similarly to ADHD. So when people are hydrated, they behave differently. When they get quality nutrients, sleep, we all know
Yeah.
the days that we haven't slept, I often say, like, my youngest daughter, when she was placed with us, she was on failure to thrive. She was 7 weeks premature, and she was on that fun, like, 2-hour feeding cycle, and it was myself and my oldest son who were taking care of her. So he would get up and feed her at midnight and 2
Oh,
AM, and then I would get up at and until my sitter came during the day, and then I would do all the early evening feedings, and it was, I don't even remember the first year of her life.
yeah. It's a lot.
I don't think he does either. It was
No,
it was another level, like, just the lack of sleep that we had during that year. My
that's why
kids.
we choose to have more kids, right? Because we forget because we didn't sleep and we don't remember how bad it is.
Yep, yep.
So can you share a quick sensory regulation strategy that would work for kids, maybe like in the moment or maybe even adults too?
Absolutely. So my favorite one is probably either water, which water is a natural human regulator. And so I love using water, whether it's filling water bottles, listening to rain, washing dishes. I often say if you've got to have a tough conversation with your kid, have it at the sink, while
Wow.
he's doing dishes, because everybody's had that kid, if you've had children at all, who says, I don't want to take a shower. And you're like, you smell like foot. You need to go take a shower. You finally get them in there, and then they come out and they're like, "Oh, I showered." And you're like, "Your hair's not even wet. You
You're like,
didn't
there you
shower.
have
Get
it.
back in there." And they go back in, and then they come out and they're like, "See, my hair's wet now." And you're like, "You still stink. Like, you're
Yeah,
not gonna
you
take a
need
shower." They finally get in there, and then they're in there singing, and you're banging on the door going, "Okay, your sibling needs to
it's
take a shower too. Come on out." And when they come out and they're like, "I love you, mom. I love you, dad. Things so great." Well, and it's because water is a regulator. So, if you can use water before you have to have a hard conversation or something like that, whether it's getting your kid to go take a shower or a bath, or just turning on the faucet and watering the plants or filling the dog water bowl, whatever it may be, that will help significantly. My other one is probably pressure on the stomach. And the reason why is because 80% of our serotonin is made in the gut, not in the brain. And most of us do not have enough serotonin. And that serotonin level is 100% impacted by food we eat, the nutrients we're consuming because it takes a lot of nutrients to make serotonin. So if you put pressure on the stomach, it pushes it out into the bloodstream. So I'll often tell teachers and parents store things on the floor. Try not to store things up high and that sort of
Right.
thing because I mean that helps too from a vagus nerve perspective and all that. But you want to store things low so that they have to put the pressure on the stomach in order to activate and push that serotonin out to get them more level. So a lot of times I'll walk by kids and I'll drop things on the floor. And they'll be like, "Oh, I'm picking them up for me." And I'm like, "I'm such a glad sack,"
Yeah.
and they're helping me pick them up and everything else. And I'm like, "Thank you so much. You're so fabulous." And, it was probably because they weren't paying attention in class, or it was my kids and they were arguing and I wanted to stop the argument or something like that. So it will
Wow.
do that as well. So all
I'm gonna
those are
use
like
that trick.
probably the 2 easy ones because I always say I don't wanna ask parents and educators to do another thing. I just want to give them better use of strategies that are already happening at a time that can be more productive for them.
Yeah. And water. I mean, I remember when with my kids when they were babies, I was like, get them either in the water or outside. And I would put my son's head under the top of his head under the faucet, like on whatever the shower mode. And he would just immediately stop
Relax.
crying
Yep,
and relax. So it's interesting that a lot of the things you're saying dealing with kids in middle and high school or even adults is really stuff that is we were told as parents with newborns,
absolutely, yeah. And
which
it
is
still works. Again, it works for us
yeah.
too. And I would say, for parents too, take care of yourselves. I'm that same parent. You haven't had a shower in 2 days, you've earned it.
It's
Lock the bathroom door, give yourself the 12 minutes
yeah.
because life gets busy and you get deprioritize yourself.
Yeah. And the other one that I wanted to ask you about was the relational frame therapy. I was reading about that. I have not ever heard of that. And I feel like maybe a lot of people have not heard of that. So, how does that look in real life with children? Like, what is it and how can you use it?
It's really like the verbal context of how we present information and how people take it. And I often say this to my staff when we're together and everything. I say, I don't typically see the same students every day. And so when I see a student, I want them to think that they were 100% and are the most important part of my day. So
Hmm.
every way I'm framing it and how I'm interacting with them, I want them to feel that way. And I also want the staff to feel that way too. They need to. Everybody needs to feel that way. They need to feel valued in that way. And even though relational frame is really about how you lay the information out in the verbal context that you're using because that helps to create the thoughts in our mind, I'm utilizing it in a way that's saying how can we make this person feel super valued? Because typically I'm working with people who feel very marginalized.
Yeah, that's fair. And I'm just thinking of people in my life who make me feel important in the room, and it's so true. I like feeling that way. Why wouldn't a child want to feel that way
Yeah,
as well?
and should. And
Uh,
that's the hard thing too for adults is we get used to not feeling that way, especially as
mhm.
parents. It's a pretty thankless job. So
Yeah.
feeling like taking those little nuggets with you when you can. My youngest got real sick a few weeks back, and we were in Boston Children's Hospital for a while. And there was one day where I was sitting beside her, and she said, Mom, you're always here. She said, No matter what happens, she said, you're the one person that's always there. She said, You're always there for me. And I was like, Oh my gosh, Nora, thank you.
That
It was
means
like,
so
I like
much.
text my husband. I was like, This is a nugget I will cherish.
Yeah, it really
He does
is
not
so
hand
important.
compliments out easily.
So another important thing, I'm trying to raise my children with resilience and teaching it to students as well. If a parent could only do maybe one thing at home to build emotional resilience in their child, what would you tell them to do?
I think it's to have fun with failure. We're as a culture have become so fearful of letting our kids fail and wanting to protect them instead of really celebrating failures as much as
Mhm.
success because it's a part of growth and it's part of the journey and learning what you want to be and what you don't want to be, and allowing it to be okay. It's okay to fail. It's oftentimes we learn so much more because our brain has to do so much, make so much more effort in order to do things. And so I think that's a huge part of it, is not feeling the guilt or shame because things didn't go the way that we had planned, but knowing that there is something that we're going to glean from every experience.
Yeah, and I was just talking to my students about this actually last week, and I said, "How many of you guys are afraid to fail?" And they all like kind of raised their
Yeah,
hand, and I'm like, "We're gonna start something where we have like failure Fridays.
that's great.
Everyone's gonna go around and talk about one thing they failed at because everybody's afraid of it, but that is some." And I was too. Like until I was in my 30s, I feel like I was afraid to fail at
I
things. And
still
like
am.
yeah, it's a conscious thing to be like, it's okay if I don't succeed, even though I really want to.
It's so good for people to do, and I just think we've, as a culture, have moved away from it so much because there's so many safety nets that we can put
Mhm.
into place. And it's funny, when my middle son was in high school, and I would say to teachers, I would say, please don't give him 2 3 chances. If he doesn't get it done, just fail him. He's a smart kid, he'll recover. And if he doesn't, well, then he'll have to
Yeah.
figure that out. I'd rather him work on failing with these sorts of things than have something more massive happen later. And it will. But if he feels a lot of guilt and shame over those things happening, then he's never going to be able to recover from those things. So I think that's a big part of it, because if you're just starting to have failures as an adult, that's where it's really hard. And I see so many kids nowadays that are like, I'm not going to try that because I could fail.
Yeah. I totally agree with that as well. And I'm like, you could just try and do your best and then it'll be okay. So we talked a lot about, kids and their behaviors, but it's not just for kids, as we just said, behavior change. What's one habit that you had to personally unlearn as you went through all of the different degrees and certificates and all that you went through that you kind of found like, wow, I really have to unlearn this one behavior?
I think that the biggest thing was multitasking. I mean, I had always prided myself so much on multitask, multitask, multitask for years, and then it got to the point where I was multitasking to the point that it was at the detriment of other people around me. So I was that person that was on my phone at the same time I was talking to someone and everything else, and I have that ADHD brain that I can do that, but it makes people feel undervalued, and it's not healthy. After a while, you get very fragmented yourself. So for me to actually say, nope, I'm doing this right now and I'm going to focus on this, is incredibly hard for me because my brain wants to go in 50 different directions. So I
Yes.
spend a lot of time refocusing myself, and constantly saying in my head, let it go, Bethany. Let it go, Bethany. Bethany, I said, let it go, let it go, let it go. And saying, you're just focusing on this right now. And for me, that's really tough. And I think for most people, that's a really tough thing. And it's probably one of those things that I work on all the time, because no amount of things I learn or anything else will allow me to get time back with the people
Right.
that I care for.
Yeah. So true. So your job is probably extremely overstimulating, and then you go and coach soccer afterwards. What's one self-care ritual that helps you kind of reset?
I meditate usually once or twice a day. And I'm really lucky that we often have students that have physical fitness goals and things like that. So I'm able to hike or bike or do other sorts of physical activities with them, which I'm so fortunate. Every now and then we'll take a picture of a hike and I'll say, I love my job. I'm so
Yeah.
lucky I get to do this
Very
as
nice.
part of
Yeah.
my work, for sure. And I am very possessive about my sleep. Like, I go up into my bedroom at a certain time every night, and, um, I don't usually come back down for most anything unless the kids are sick or something, because it's just, I'm very protective about my sleep, and I think those are big ones for me. The meditating and the sleep are
Really
non-negotiable.
important. So you have given us so much wonderful information. But for one last question, if every parent and teacher listening today could walk away with one message from you, the thing you want etched in their memory, what would it be?
That most everything stems from safety, either theirs or those around them. That if they don't feel safe, they're going to demonstrate that in everything they do. And it comes out in their body language and everything else. And the people around them also do not feel safe. So, get themselves feeling safe and feeling comfortable so that they can take a risk and try something new, try something different. And the same for those, people around them that they're supporting, because people don't take risks if they don't feel safe.
All right, well, that is a great place to end it. So that's going to bring us to the end of another episode of The Running Wine Mom. Dr. B, thank you so much for this conversation. I know parents, educators, and myself are walking away with tools that they can use today and a deeper sense of hope for tomorrow. So for those of you listening, be sure to check out Dr. B's book, Ease the Pain in the Classroom, and her resources, the Behavior Bootcamp and Core Methods. I'll link everything in the show notes so you can kind of do a deeper dive. As always, thank you for spending time with me on The Running Wine Mom. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review if you loved it, and share this episode with a mom who needs to hear it. You can follow me on Instagram at The Running Wine Mom _. And Bethany, where can the listeners find you?
Easiest place to find us is at www.thebehaviorbootcamp.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this. This is a great conversation.
Thanks
Loved
for
it.
having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, you are strong, you are capable, and you are all amazing. Until next time, keep running, keep sipping, and keep embracing the joy of motherhood. Cheers, and I will be back next Tuesday.